other words, the premises or the analysis that you have. When you give support or when you give analysis, you're essentially walking the judges through your arguments as to why they stand true. So, oftentimes, I think if you think about an argument in the sense that you want to reduce the amount of assumptions made, well then that's where the analysis comes in handy. Essentially, the analysis is proving to the judges that you're not making any assumptions and that everything you say is going to be true. So the reason why here is bolded in the slide is because a really good exercise for you to create analysis throughout an argument is to continue asking yourself why what you're saying is true. We'll get to an example in the next slide. But the third component of an argument is the impact that the argument has. In other words, what is the end result or the terminal result of your argument? So this basically should also be your thesis, just because it's essentially what stands out the most to the judges. When you signpost your arguments, it's easy to understand what the impact is. And in general, the impact should also be intuitively something that you associate with your stance, or something that is poignant throughout the entire debate. The relevance is the last component of your argument, and essentially, this is linking back your argument to the actual debate round itself. Because oftentimes, a struggle that many debaters go through when they first start debating is making these arguments and then struggling to actually make that connection between all of the things that they claim to be true to why it actually matters in the grand scheme of things within the debate round. So relevance is super important for not only linking back your arguments back to the debate round, but also proving to the judges why your arguments are also more relevant to the debate or the scope of the debate than your opponent's arguments. Okay, so I added in this photo of the bridge, and I think honestly, like most of these slides are just made by past VP trainings, but I remember in one year the VP training had this image of a bridge. It just stood out to me. You can think of the bridge as like the support that's holding up your argument, and the two sides of the bridges are essentially where you're starting off with that argument and where you want to end up with or at. Okay, so here's just an argument. So the example motion here is this house would implement a syntax on fast food restaurants. I've included a brief definition of what a syntax is, that being a tax on items considered detrimental or harmful to consumers, so things like alcohol or tobacco. And I've created this, template argument that you can make on opposition side. So if you're against implementing a syntax on fast food restaurants, a potential argument that you could make, the thesis being that it harms low-income individuals, and the analysis being that fast food restaurants are more saturated in low-income areas, otherwise known as food deserts, and then you want to ask yourself, well, why is this the case? And so if you ask yourself why, some answers that you can think of would be that low-income individuals can't afford as many healthy alternatives, but more importantly, low-income individuals typically also work longer hours and have less time to meal prep. And all this feeds into the fact that as a franchise, or I guess as a business owner, when you consider that these individuals are probably more likely to buy into your product, then perhaps you want to set up your business there more so than a healthier restaurant would, precisely just because usually healthier foods are also more expensive. So all of these, bullet points that you see are all premises that link that you want to characterize in terms of, what does status quo look like and why these certain things are true. But you don't say these things just for the sake of them being true. You say these things because you want them to have an impact on the overall debate ground. And so the impact that you can state to the judges is that a syntax would essentially disproportionately affect low-income individuals because it would make food more expensive for them. And essentially, when low-income individuals have to spend a greater amount of their income on food, this also means less spending on other areas that could be helpful in just day-to-day life. So, with all of this being said, you then want to focus in on the relevance of this argument, in which you can frame this from a health perspective. And you can say that individuals must cut down on their food consumption, which could lead to worse health outcomes, or they cut down on consumption in other areas of their life, which could probably also, I guess, increase the amount of stress to their life. Stress itself is also linked back to health, because individuals with higher levels of stress are also likely to be less healthy in the sense that they're more prone to certain, diseases or complications.
Yeah, quick question. So when it comes to relevance, other than saying it will lead to worse health outcomes, do I have to go further than that and say, oh, I'm probably gonna have a stomach ache, probably like diabetes, diarrhea, stuff like that? Do I have to specify what these world health outcomes are?
Yeah, so obviously specifying like what the health outcomes could be is a really good way to, make, I guess, make these impacts more tangible for the judges to understand. Because just saying that this can have a negative impact on your health isn't as impactful or persuasive to a judge as saying that this will lead people to have higher levels of, I don't know, cardiovascular complications, in the sense that, you have higher blood levels, and then therefore your risk of getting certain complications because of that is also increased. And then you can double down on that and say that this is even worse for low-income individuals because usually they don't have another safety net. They have to work long hours, otherwise they can't really sustain themselves. They oftentimes work on an I guess hour to hour. Sorry, I can't think of the term, but they work to meet ends meet, and essentially any small disruptions to their work schedule is going to have a very big impact on their overall quality of life. One last thing that I want to point out in making an argument is, and especially with respect to the relevance component, is that you always want to also state what the counterfactual of your argument is. So this is very important because essentially, first, a counterfactual is essentially what would happen if this motion did not take place. Or in other words, a counterfactual is examining the impacts that would arise from a binary cut in terms of the motion's dynamics. So if I am on side opposition and I am saying, no, we don't want syntaxes, well then I can explain why a syntax would be bad, but then I also have to explain why a world without a syntax would be better. Because if I fail to explain and characterize what a world without a syntax would look like, which is status quo, then it's hard to actually make comparative judgments about which argument is better from which side as a judge. In other words, you're not really comparing your argument to any standard, and that makes it very difficult for both the other team to debate against you, and it also makes it very difficult for the judges to weigh your arguments because they're not really sure what the alternative is to your debate case. Essentially with Clash, you want to attack the truth or relevance of another team's arguments, and an argument can be irrelevant because of a few different factors. A, it doesn't connect to the entirety of the motion. B, it doesn't fulfill their burden. C, it isn't as important as other arguments in the round. And yeah, so these are just the broad reasons as to why an argument can be irrelevant. We will spend a lot more time honing in on how to improve on your clashing skills at the next meeting. Yeah.
Can you define burden?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So basically, the idea of burden kind of, I guess, was first conceptualized within the realm of like quote unquote meta debate, which is essentially analyzing the responsibilities that each team has, given their position, whether they're opening government or closing opposition, and then essentially concluding what you have to do as a team and concluding what you have to defend or what you have to prove. So I guess the burden then is usually spoken about from the perspective that a certain team that is defending status quo, they have the burden to prove why or defend why status quo should continue to exist. But burdens can essentially take form in all sorts of dynamics. But essentially, burdens are just things that certain teams have to do, given their position in that round, in order to win the debate round. Okay. Are there any questions so far on Clash or how to make an argument?
Should you be doing your clash and then your constructive arguments, or should you do your constructive arguments and then your clash?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'd say for the most part, it is kind of up to your personal preference. Although I would argue that there are certain advantages of presenting your clash first, precisely because this way it kind of flows better chronologically speaking in a way that's easier for the judges to follow. So if you present your clash first, it means that the judges are easily able to segue from your opposition's argument and then reasons as to why they should not stand, and then you can easily move on into your own argument. So it just makes it easier for the judges to follow along throughout the debate round, whereas if you do your clash at the very end, then the judge also has to recall, again, after 5 minutes or so of your constructive material, what exactly your opposition team said, and then factor in, well, did they say that? And, they have to do a lot more processing, which makes it harder for the judges. So I would recommend doing clash first, and then moving on to your constructive. But you can also alternatively intersperse your clash throughout your constructive material as well, if it flows well or better for your overall speech. Why does clashing matter for front half? Essentially, as a front half team, your arguments have to be left standing, even after 30 minutes of other people arguing back and forth on the same topic. Because one disadvantage that front half teams, and we'll get more into this in the next slide, but essentially, as a front half team, you want to make sure that your arguments are as robust as possible. You leave no holes or no potential entryways for attacks, because
follow the 30-second rule or the 1 minute rule?
30 seconds, okay. So because, I guess to make it like as proportional as possible, we could do 30 seconds. So the timekeeper is gonna bang on the desk for 30 seconds, just for now, because we're doing 5 minute switches. And I also just wanna say this as well, because this often happens when people first start debating, that you cannot follow up after giving your POI. So, yeah, basically if I give a POI and then the speaker responds to it and I think of a really good comeback to it, I'm not allowed to continue on that conversation. Instead, have to sit down after you give your POI. And the recommendation for giving POIs is essentially to take 2 and to give 2. Yeah. Lastly, POIs can indeed be factored into judge deliberations. So again, if a POI is single-handedly
for LGBTQ youth that they could attend by choice. So we would not be enforcing their attendance to these schools. They could choose whether or not they would like to attend the schools that were more general public education or a more specialized, more niche LGBTQ plus exclusive school. The reason that we are proposing this is because, as everyone is aware, LGBTQ youth are very marginalized in today's society. They often suffer from higher depression rates, they suffer from higher suicide rates, and many other mental health issues. And so one of the things that you need to note is that if we have schools that these students can choose to go to, they can be around like-minded individuals who they can relate to, who have a shared identity, and likely would reduce the suicide rates, likely would reduce the mental health issues, and would create support systems that they might not have at a public education, a general public education area. Another thing that we see, especially in today's news and media, is bathrooms. So we see that the issue with bathrooms, female and male, generally is very contentious because people believe your sex, whatever you were assigned at birth, should be in the bathroom that you go to. And in schools that are LGBTQ exclusive, you would find that there would be a lot more inclusivity and a lot more comfortability for these students and flexibility for these students using bathrooms that they feel that they identify with and that they feel would best suit them for when they are going through that. Another thing that we would like to look at is that, once again, hate crimes. This is a real issue where students are bullied, students are attacked, and marginalized because of their identity. If we, absolutely.
So for these, is there a criteria to select who can go to these schools, or is it just by self-identification? And would these just be elementary schools or also high schools?
So what we're going to do, I likely have a self-identification process because if someone is gay or someone is lesbian, it might not be as immediately identifiable as perhaps someone who is trans. And the thing is, it is something they feel within themselves. And there's a plethora of of things that are underneath the LGBTQ plus umbrella, and we want to make them all feel welcome in our schools. So it would be self-identification. Another thing is that you mentioned what grades would it encompass. We would likely we would be dealing with all the way, likely high school, because it's just when students are more able to, show this identity off, although probably, middle school up until high school would likely be our cutoff, just so that people can, that's generally where they're finding their identity, and it would allow them to learn a lot more about their identity within the school system. So another thing that we would like to look at would be, just give me a moment here. These schools would be a smaller scale, so, just one moment please. So on a smaller scale, you would see people might argue that the infrastructural and the cost that this would cost on the economy might be high, but you see that there are already schools that cater to specific groups, such as Catholic schools. So this is a group where people who have a similar identity can go and engage and learn about this part of their identity while receiving an adequate general education. And as well, because of the rates of LGBTQ plus within a city or society, it likely would not be such a strain on resources that that would even be a note. And I can take their.
You did mention that there is a scarcity of gender-neutral bathrooms in current-day society,
Yes.
like normal schools. But there already is a trend of pushing it towards the other side. But there is a trend of creating gender-neutral bathrooms in normal schools already. Don't you think your policy kind of reaffirms that and kind of demolishes that trend to a significant extent?
No, I wouldn't argue that at all, actually, because as I said, it's an optional thing. Not all people who are LGBTQ are going to attend these schools. In fact, you are still going to have a significant portion who might still want to go to these more general public schools because that's just their friend groups. And so that these bathrooms would still likely be introduced in these other schools, but having these separate schools would simply further the trend because people would see it as the norm and people would see it happening more, and the infrastructure and the know-how as to how to actually implement it safely and efficiently would be explored more extensively. Thank you so much.
Opponents. As the leader of the opposition, I would like to bring to you 4 points about actual harms separating uh, as something that's inherently different to them. They won't be able to form personal connections, whether that be friendships or romantic relationships with LGBTQ students. And this will hinder their ability to do that further in life after graduation. Because even if we separate the schools, that won't last forever. Students grow up, they will graduate, they will go into society, and they will need to interact with different people in their life. However, because during their youth they lack such an opportunity, or such an opportunity was greatly diminished, this will lead to a bigger difficulty in that. Segregating schools will lead to a more segregated society in the long run. And because the students lack the personal connections, there is less incentive for them to fight against bigotry they see. Even if they, one of you have the POI?
Oh yeah, take it, yeah. So you said that, after, we can't segregate schools forever, of course, which means, people, go in society, interact with LGBTQ people. But won't they do that anyways outside of school? Like, there's nothing stopping them from interacting with each other outside of school and the ones that do stay in public schools.
Well, first of all, yes, some LGBTQ students will stay in public school, but because there is a separate school for them, we believe that there will be far less. LGBTQ students are already a minority in the population. If you divert them away from school, there will be even less of them. And also, school is a huge part for children and for youth to socially develop. And even if they might interact with LGBTQ students outside of school, there's a much smaller chance, and this just leads to a lot less interaction. And also, this will lead to uncertainty for students who are unsure of their identity. Oftentimes, one's identity isn't known until later in their life. And transferring schools can be a very difficult process. Questioning students in LGBTQ schools, once they discover if they discover they're straight, they might feel pressured to continue pretending that they are LGBTQ, to not have to transfer out and lose all their friends. And the other way around too. And the final point is that, how do parents play into this? A lot of parents already believe public schools are brainwashing their students to be LGBTQ. So if they see that these students are exclusively for LGBTQ, children in less accepting households will be the parents will be even more reluctant to send them to it. So we believe this only benefits the students who are the most fortunate. And for these three reasons, we have passed our plans. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, our OG Prime Minister has just pointed out that this proposal is not compulsory for all the LGBTQ people. They still have the option to choose whether they want to go to the public school, normal public school, or this special school. So Canada, as everybody knows, we emphasize on freedom of choices. Freedom of choice is very important, okay? Including church, restaurant, or university, any wedding or any wedding you go, you have freedom of choices. And as we have seen, the law already amended to make LGBTQ have more right in this country. So we just want to further to legalize more choice for these people so that they can feel easier. Yes.
Well, it's just 4 minutes.
Okay,
left.
yeah, okay. Feel easier. So, before we start to build some of these schools, we have to estimate how many of these LGBTQ students want to go to this separate school. They still have the choice. Oh, I don't want to. They can still keep on going to normal school. But I would believe some of these these students would like to go to school, a separate school with their own interests. I would like to remind all of you, this is not a a school equivalent to residential school, because this school, we have freedom for these students, special students, to choose from, you know. So what's wrong with that? When they have the choice to choose, we cannot find any room to object it. You know, the cost, okay, we're using taxpayers' money. But as I have just said, you know, we will estimate how many of them will go. If not too many people, not many students will choose, we don't have to spend too much cost. We don't even have to build, probably we don't have to build a new school. There are many schools already sit idle in this city or in many cities. So we can use this school already given up because of lack of students. We can use this. Okay? Yeah. So yes.
All the stuff that you said may be true, but why don't you do the same thing to universities and segregate students in universities as well?
This is a good question. No, we start with high school first. And if the financial situation for the provincial government or the federal government afford, this house will further suggest that this proposal will apply to university or any other institution as well. Yeah, institution. This is a good. And this, by doing this, this will create Canada is one of the good countries have bigger freedom of choice. So far, I don't count too many of these, countries in the whole world. They have no choice. So, by passing the law to create separate school, Canada is going to take the lead in this world to establishing this school. Okay, so we solve this issue. As you find out, the law already passed, give more rights for this LGBTQ, same gender marriages, or they, if they get welfare and then they already accept that. So this is another big step forward to give more right, more choice for these people, apparently being stigmatized in this society. Once this separate school is established, this would encourage, this special student, far more relaxing to choose to go to this school. Probably in the beginning, some of them, they scared, I don't want to go to, the separate school being stigmatized. But once more people come, they are accepted by the country or the society, there will be more. And final word is Canada, freedom of choice. We being citizens of Canada, we should support it.